Um, I'm kind of curious as to where you folks stand on the issue. It's something we hear about pretty much every day in the middle of downtown. A couple different areas. One is what we are requiring in terms of parking stalls per square footage. I understand that, in recent months we've lowered that number, but can it be lowered more? The other aspect of it is, whether we have a parking problem or whether we don't have one, and where parking fits in terms of accommodating new development or bigger development. The second part of it is some perceived acrimony among people who shop downtown, cars getting towed, $50 plus parking fines, the guy on the Segway handing out tickets as soon as the time limit expires, those kinds of things. I'm wondering, do you think the current way of dealing with parking is working, or you think that it needs to be improved? Okay, that's a lot, so go ahead.
Jarrett, we'll start with you, and we'll move to 2 minutes because this is a big question.
I was going to say we need to put a minute limit on his question asking.
So noted.
Okay, parking spaces per square foot. I think it's important to remember as we look at projects like the Palo Alto Medical Foundation, which was brought before the Planning Commission, that one of the biggest concerns with that was that the parking requirements that had been reduced for the downtown had also affected properties such as Altos Oaks, which is primarily a medical facility street. Those parking requirements should be higher. There are parking problems on that street, and if those properties were developed under the downtown guidelines, we would have much more severe parking problems along that area. As far as, let's move on, the parking problem, I think it's great that Bruce brought up that there are many parking problems. One of the parking problems is that people park in front of a sign that says no parking. As Tuck Jonas has addressed many cities, he's looked at many cities around our area to see if there are more successful ways to work with the residents against parking violations. I believe that it is important to remember that our Segway driver, Rod, is extremely good at his job. I don't think that we need to necessarily haggle Rod or get frustrated with him. I've gotten a parking ticket before, and it's very frustrating. It's easy to take it out on the individual that wrote it for you, but he's good at his job. I respect him for that, and I think that he's a necessary part of the education enforcement that needs to happen for parking problems to be reduced. The other aspect of the parking problem is whether or not we have enough parking in the downtown. I believe that today, currently, if you go downtown, you can find a parking spot at any time of the day in our downtown. Granted, it might not be directly in front of the store that you want to shop at, but I guarantee that you can find a parking spot. As the vitality and vibrancy of our downtown picks up, we will have a parking problem. The parking lots that we created were created years ago, and while they were a progressive, forward-thinking step that our city made through public and private enterprise, it is something that will need to be readdressed. So I believe that today we do not have a parking problems in the number of spaces in the downtown specifically, but I do believe that we'll need to address it.
So I think that our parking problem is between 11 and 2 p.m. on weekdays, particularly Fridays right now in downtown Los Altos, so you can't park directly in front of where you want to go. I do think that we should recognize that we have, this council has pursued through the Downtown Development Committee a reduction in the office requirement from 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet to 3.3 spaces per 1,000 square feet. We could look at more. We've also pursued creative solutions with the Packard Foundation for their development agreement and their alternative transportation management plan, where they are underparked by 85 spaces because they've promised to keep their employees and guests and staff to use alternative management of transportations rather than single occupancy vehicles. We've also worked out a solution with Safeway, where they are underparked as according to our ratios, and yet they are working because their high peak demand is at a different time. It's not 11 to 2 at lunchtime. It's at 4 to 6 after school and after work. 4 to 7 actually, and so we've worked out a plan where they might be able to participate in the parking district if they make their parking available to the public at all times. We're also pursuing as I mentioned before, the Parking Plazas Opportunity Study, where we hope to deliver 200 net new parking places during the day and much more than that in the evening when the office parking places are opened up to the public. And finally, we need to find a way to get to the approximately 150 employees of downtown businesses who park in the prime customer parking places to park elsewhere, to park further out in the lots. That would go a long way in our downtown to helping things. And in terms of towing, we have redesigned the signage. We do our best to tell everyone that they need to get their cars out of the zone. But the other choice to towing is we don't have events downtown, and I don't think that's right.
I would hate to create some of the problems that Jared points out if you reduce the parking requirements even further. I've been in towns where you can't find parking at all, and certainly that would be inappropriate in our retail areas. But we do want Los Altos to be seen as a business-friendly downtown, and as we go through our redevelopment, I think we should implement the current reduced parking requirements that we have right now and add to that an in-lieu parking fee where, for example, the city will eventually build the parking as it becomes necessary using funds from the developers, but developers don't actually have to build giant holes in 3 stories of parking underneath their building because it's not appropriate for some of our buildings. So at this time, I don't see any reason to reduce the amount of parking required for the cities, but I think we can still be business-friendly along those lines. I don't think right now we have too few park spots downtown. As it comes to enforcement, citizens, there's a citizenship role as well. The police department clearly marks all of our signs for parking, clearly marks the towing. You'd almost trip over the towing signs before the farmers market. So there's a citizenship responsibility as well.
I have a staff report from the city. Came out in September. It says it's a well-documented planning principle that downtown parking districts can utilize a lower shared parking ratio than a standalone business can. So when we require developers to have standalone parking for their buildings, for their development, we are charging for parking when we could be building office or retail space. We have enough parking. There are a lot of unutilized spaces in buildings that don't utilize their own parking. There are a lot of vacant spots in existing structures. If we found a way to be more creative with the parking that we have plenty of parking even in the best of times. Some of the studies that we've done were done years ago before the economy went in the tank. We've got plenty of parking. We just don't want to walk. So there are I don't want to walk. I want to park right out in front of Starbucks. But the space is there. I don't want to see us devote a lot of our precious real estate for above ground parking when there are many more creative ways for us to utilize the resources that we have.
Nancy, hold on to that mic. If you support a community-based visioning effort, would you support having it started right away, and would you vote sufficient funding for the effort?
Yes.
Yes.
At this point, I've concluded that the best next step for us is a quantitative survey of a representative sample of the Los Altos residents conducted by a professional marketing research firm. Now, I admit I'm biased. I teach marketing research at Menlo College, so I think that that's the best way for us. It's cheaper and it's faster, and it will be less open, frankly, to influence by advocacy groups if we take the temperature of the community, and that's what I was going to lobby for at our budget check at the end of the year, assuming I'm still on the council and still paying attention. A visioning process, as we heard earlier, can take years. It can cost. Menlo Park, as I read in one of the local papers, spent $1.2 million on their visioning process and specific plan over a period of years and ended up with a plan that is so controversial the implementation is now being disputed by various groups in town. That's not what I want for downtown Los Altos. I want us to continue on the path that we're on. I think a survey would be a great way to get an unbiased read on what the community wants.
I work at Cisco Systems in a statistical department. In the statistical department, the first step to any great project is understanding from a good sample what the true environment is. I think that what's most important about this question is appropriate funding. Allocating appropriate funding, that means not underfunding the survey, and that means not leaving it to go on endlessly like in communities around us where too much money has been spent on it. I think putting ourselves under the gun, providing ourselves a timeline for which we have to implement this survey would provide a great way for us to move forward, provide the funding for this, and as far as beginning immediately, I think that is what the city would like to do. That is what I would like to do. That is what the community has told me through visiting many residents that they would like to see. So I would work to carry out that which I believe is correct and that which the residents have told me to do.
Let's try and get even a little bit more specific. So again, from the Google moderator questions, and then we'll go back to our journalists. Vibrancy is a result of having a certain density of people in a place and a diversity of activities going on. How would you specifically create vibrancy in downtown Los Altos if elected?
As I mentioned earlier this evening, I think Fenwick and West moving into downtown Mountain View creates the density. The Class A commercial office space is a great way to approach that density. I think there are a lot of businesses in this area, in the high-tech industry, that have the ability to expand over the next couple of years as the economy nationwide recovers. They're going to be looking for communities they can expand into. Los Altos is currently not on their radar. Los Altos needs to move to make sure that as they expand, we are on their radar. We need to make zoning changes, land area ratio changes, parking ratio changes, and height limitation changes. I think that on top of that, part of the vibrancy of a community is also the events. I think we need to support the events that we do have in this town, in the downtown. I worked to support those events for many years, and I truly hold them close to my heart. Some of the events which I didn't work for, I got to participate in, such as the Pet Parade, which I watched my brother walk through downtown with an iguana on his head. I think these are the kinds of things that provide vibrancy.
We need more people downtown. How do we get there? More Class A office space, which we are beginning to develop. More housing, which we are beginning to develop. A hotel, which has been approved. A greater variety of restaurants, which we will have the space to attract soon. Larger retail spaces built to modern retail standards so we can attract upscale chains like an Apple Store, like Restoration Hardware, like Williams-Sonoma, like Anthropology. As I said before, we can't compete with the malls for the breadth of selection of shops, but we can certainly attract the cream of the crop with our unparalleled demographics. So those are the things I think we need to do.
People, places, and activities. We need all three of those things, and it's tough to get all three of them from nowhere. I think one distinguishing factor is against the malls and for us is actually place. We're downtown, we're local, you walk, you bike, we create people-friendly, pedestrian-friendly places. I talk to teenagers who complain, there's nothing to do in Los Altos. They don't need very much. All they need is a place, a safe, well-lit place nearby where they can get a coffee and a sandwich for a reasonable price and just collect. It's that people attract people. So through our downtown, our changes, our use of that massive amount of property we have in the plazas, we can create the appropriate places for people to collect and congregate downtown. That creates a whole sense of community for our downtown. And then people want to be there, and then the retailers will come.
I agree with that. I think we need more open spaces for people to collect. We need a more bicycle-friendly city, a more pedestrian-friendly city where people can go and congregate. They can have a cup of coffee, they can have a sandwich, they can see a movie, they can go to a bookstore, and they can hear some music. But open space and walkability is important.
David, over to you.
Okay, this question is about, it's a term called air rights, and that is, how would you like to use the parking lots that the city owns downtown? A few years ago, an idea was floated that perhaps something could be built above the parking lots, but it would be interesting hearing each of your opinions as to, in the future, what would you like to see done with that area?
Curtis, go ahead.
I support a public-private partnership for the development of that land, an opportunity study to see what we can build there. And that can include office and retail. Instead of those plazas right now, they're built for cars. Let's build them for people and businesses instead. parking in lieu, place the parking someplace else, build a parking structure at one end, and make people get out of their cars and walk through the downtown past all the other businesses. We can create some open space there where people will collect, and you can open up the retails towards that space so that you have a plaza. So I think the funding can come through a public-private partnership, and I think there's some many inventive things that we can do there within a 45-foot or possibly taller footprint.
Hand it to Nancy, and then we'll just come this way.
What was the question again?
How would you like to see the space above the parking lots or the parking lot itself?
It would be nice to have a parking structure. I don't like above-ground parking, but we're going to need to do some of that. Obviously, we're growing. We want to grow. We want to see more businesses downtown. We do need a place to put cars. We need a central location. That said, we should use our real estate very wisely, and where we can put office and retail, we need to put office and retail. Where we can put bikes, we need to put bikes. But multiple levels of parking structure, I think, at least 2 levels. And if we can increase our building height to hide those parking structures, that would be optimum.
Val, over to you.
The council-appointed Downtown Development Committee that I chaired for 2 years studied this very issue. We started with the idea of a parking structure. It was too expensive. It was $13 to $15 million. The city felt it couldn't afford it. And then one of our members, Ted Kokernak, proposed that we do a public-private partnership to develop our parking plazas, the city-owned parking plazas. We have now gone through a complete process that, like I said, will generate 500 to 800 new office workers on the 3 parking plazas, plazas 1, 2, and 3, which are the south parking plazas, with retail possibly and office space, maybe a hotel, maybe a theater. There's the details are yet to be worked through. Right now, what we're studying is if we did that, and we did it all as office, which is the densest use in terms of number of people per square foot in those cubicles that Jarrett was talking about. That is the worst case from a traffic study. That study is underway, an environmental impact report studying the parking impacts of 500 to 800 workers on those plazas is underway. And I think that's an excellent use for them, and we'll have the results at the end of the year.
The first thing that comes to mind with air rights is that farmer's blimp that flies over our town. I think we should charge them every time it flies over a parking plaza. On top of that, I do think that we should use those parking plazas in our development. Those are some of the largest parcels of land left in the downtown. It's important to remember that because many of the retailers are looking for the large parcels to be developed in a way that the retailers can move in and provide large square footage locations. I also believe that the Downtown Development Committee was appropriate in determining that they should be using that space for parking structures. A 45-foot limit can allow you to build up to 4 stories, potentially even 5 stories if you sink the first level of parking. I believe that some concepts, cities like Santa Cruz have put movie theaters on not the first floor. At Valco, we see a movie theater added to the top floor of the mall there. I'd love to see a theater potentially somewhere in downtown. It has to be feasible. It has to be viable for the operators. Potentially adding a theater into the parking plazas provides us with the square footage.
Bruce.
Obviously, we focused this entire forum on the downtown, but I'd like to bring up to you a question about the other shopping districts. In fact, we have 6 others, the chamber tells me. And so I'm wondering whether you have some thoughts, concerns about the other shopping districts like Rancho, Loyola Corners, or Sherwood Triangle.
Well, I'd love to continue to name the rest of them. We have the El Camino corridor, we have the Woodlands Plaza, Rancho Shopping Center, the downtown, we have the Sherwood Triangle, and Foothill. Well, Foothill Crossings, yeah. So these districts provide our residents with the ability to shop within the downtown. Each one of them is very important because not all of the residents live within walking distance of our downtown. The downtown is discussed so heavily because it's the largest, and I believe it holds the most opportunity out of all 7 of these commercial shopping districts. I think that each one of them should be cared for. Each one of them, I do preserve private property owners' rights if they're looking to develop these. I think that it's important to respect the rights of the private property owners. I believe the process that we have here in Los Altos, which allows for these developers to go through Architecture and Site Planning Commission and City Council, if needed, provides them with the ability to develop any one of these 7 commercial districts.
So all 7 of our commercial districts are important to the city for exactly that reason that Jared said, because of the residents living within the neighborhoods surrounding them. Zoning changes are the key to making things happen. So along the El Camino corridor, for example, we've now, again, eliminated story limits. We are now using heights. It's 45 feet. That will encourage redevelopment, especially of places like the Los Altos Garden Supply, which is a large parcel. We also have plans for Loyola Corners. We have a streetscape plan that's been approved by the council to improve the streetscape down in Loyola Corners. It's not funded. I lobbied to fund it instead of the intersection improvements in downtown Los Altos. I didn't prevail. Takes 3 to make anything happen on the city council, very different than industry. Rancho is a private development. You know, we can rezone that, but it's owned by a single developer, John Vidovich, and he pursues his own path with that. So each one is different. I think they're all important. I work hard to make sure that we look at what we need in each area of our town.
I think 2 areas in particular stand out for need. Val mentioned Loyola Corners, and I think that's ripe for some investment by the city as well. And I'd like to see that move forward. But the other one will be along El Camino, and that is both the Garden Center, Sherwood Triangle, and the Village Court across the way there. I think that's ripe for redevelopment. Vidovich, again, is making an investment along San Antonio there in the commercial building at, I think, the Gardens it's called. But I think we're going to see a lot of development along those areas in the coming years as the economy turns around. I think that, believe it or not, the catalyst will be the Mountain View project across the street in San Antonio and El Camino, and people will see that there are more people there. There's a reason to invest in there. One thing a little related to that is the Grand Boulevard along El Camino, and I think Los Altos should be a mover and an investor behind the project there to make El Camino more people and pedestrian friendly, as opposed to that, you know, concrete jungle that it is now.
Does anybody shop at Trader Joe's? You see the traffic over there? There are residents who live on the other side of Foothill Expressway that can't get to Trader Joe's. So I think when we do development, we need to think about the big picture, the holistic approach to how residents get to where, to the areas that we're developing, whether it's commercial or otherwise. We have a lot of opportunity in the coming years, but we need to think bigger picture on every aspect of the development.
I have a question now from the audience. In the last 15 years, there's been a 40% decline in retail revenues. No one tonight has addressed why the town is dying. Retailers can't pay the rents. I'd like you to speak about this. So Nancy, we'll start with you. Why is the town dying, in your opinion?
I hate to coin the term feet on the street, but we don't have enough pedestrians. We don't have enough people who come to Los Altos for the businesses. If you go to have lunch in Los Altos, the restaurants are busy. But retailers are leaving. They're leaving because there isn't enough traffic. We don't have enough of a draw. We don't have enough. We don't have an anchor tenant that brings people downtown. I've done a lot of reading about the decreasing revenues in downtown. There's just not enough of a draw for people, and we have opportunities in the people who are traveling down Fremont Boulevard every day. We're not bringing enough of those people into our downtown area. The requirements for developers are, I think, too tough.
Is the question, why has there been a 40% decline?
Why do you think? Right.
I believe there are 2 forces, and I think it's occurred over a whole generation, maybe 25 years. We may have only tracked it for the last 14 or so. One of them is the competition. Neighboring cities and shopping malls have invested. There are, in other words, reasons to go someplace else instead of shopping downtown. And the other one, I think, is cultural, in that there are fewer people around Los Altos downtown. We have 2 working parents now within families, so there isn't somebody around home. There isn't somebody to go downtown. Everybody gets in their cars to go places. That's occurred over the last generation. As a consequently, there's simply less foot traffic downtown. So those two are the forces that I think we need to fight against in our new downtown.
Val?
I dispute that Los Altos is dying. I think it's struggling. I think we are in the midst of the greatest recession since the Depression in the 30s. Everyone is suffering. Los Altos is not suffering more than our surrounding communities. In fact, we're in, I think, better shape. So I'm concerned about our decline. I'm certainly concerned about our level of vacancies. Some of our vacancies are caused by 30-year owners who've retired, like Beth Miller of Marion Jackson. Linden Tree's Dennis and Linda Ronberg, who sold their business. Linden Tree continues, but that's a personal choice by the owners. I also think that we need a different mix of retailers and restaurants downtown than what we have now. And to do that, we need the larger spaces built to modern retail standards so we can attract the kind of upscale retailers and destination restaurants that I know this community can support. It all comes down to foot traffic, but first we have to have people down there working in offices, living downtown, and then we need to have the places they want to go and spend money.
As an economist, I'd like to address the why we have a 40% decline. We're in a recession. As far as how we compare, there are many other issues that have been addressed here, but we are in a recession. 40% decline is due to that. What I'd like to address is why we're lacking behind the other cities. I think that we truly are behind the other cities. In the last 10 years, Los Altos tax revenue has only grown 23%, which is less than half of that of some of the cities around us. I think that's the issue that we should be asking. Why are we behind the other cities? I'd like to see that be fixed. That was yesterday, but tomorrow and 30 years from now, where are we going to be? I want to be here, and I want to be in a place where I love going downtown. So that's important. That's why I'm running for council. Why have we lost 40% of our tax base? Because of the recession. But how can we make steps tomorrow such that we have more people in the downtown, increase the amount of people working in our downtown, and how can City Council be proactive to make that happen?
So I'm going to do a follow-up on this one because this came from the audience. I don't think the focus is on 40%, but it's on 15 years. So speak to your sense of urgency, because many of the people in the audience have a feeling that this is a deterioration of 40% over 15 years, and it's been difficult as community members to grab hold of what needs to be done. So if you're elected, how will you make sure that we don't have another 5, 10, 15 years of deteriorating retail revenues? I think that it's 15 years of deterioration. I think that's the concern, Jarrett.
Okay.
First to you.
I get to go first this time. Okay, so 15 years is much broader scope. I think that's more appropriate to be looking at. That's what I was trying to kind of address, was that it's much more than the last 3 years. It's that over the history of our last 15 years is a great period of time to look at. Los Altos has not been making, every 15 years, a retail concept, the best retail concept in the United States, dies. We saw Mervyn's, which was a phenomenal retail concept. It sank. It went bankrupt during the recession. What steps has Los Altos made since putting in the parking clauses to really make this forward-thinking, embracing the new retail of the era? I think that that's what we need to look at. How do we make our change of the retail concept that will last the next 15 years? And how do we make sure that every 15 years we're addressing the age of retail that has come? I think that's what I would like to do. I think the sense of urgency is absolutely appropriate. I think that Los Altos needs to make steps tomorrow, today, so that we're doing that.
Val?
I'd just like to make clear that what has declined over the past 15 years is sales tax revenue. And actual fact, in Los Altos, our property tax revenues to the city of Los Altos have gone up every year. So we need to make a distinction in kind of revenue that we're concerned about. I do think that we need, as I've said, I feel repetitive here, we need to attract different kinds of retail. We need to support that through foot traffic, and this current council has put those in place. I've only been on the council 5 years. I think we've done a lot this last 5 years. I can't speak to the 10 years before. I was raising kids and working and serving on nonprofit boards, and frankly, I just really wasn't paying attention to what was happening other than shopping in downtown Los Altos. So since I've been on, I think we've made a lot of difference, and we have more good things that we're doing so that we can have 0 vacancies and increase our sales tax going forward.
I think Los Altos has been in decline over the last 15 years of the downtown, and I don't want to see it continuing on that path. So there are some specific actions that I would take on council. The first is continuing the work of the council in supporting the development of infrastructure, as Val points out. You do need infrastructure down there. But the second one is to fund a program between the city and the business districts downtown to actually market Los Altos. We do have a good product downtown. We can have a great downtown. We have a relatively recession-proof demographic here. I believe you can market that to retailers around if you do so in a coordinated manner. In some sense, we have a fortunate situation of adjacent vacancies, and it's easier to market adjacent vacancies to pairs of retailers or a retailer and say you have a larger space, there's a way for you to come in with your preferred neighbor into Los Altos, which again is a good demographic. So the city actually has to be very proactive in marketing the downtown as if we owned it like a Stanford.
There's no question that that we have more residential property here than commercial property. And residential property can only increase if it doesn't sell 2% a year based on Prop 13. So our opportunity is going to be in commercial space. We need to shift the redeveloped value of property versus the current value so that businesses will find it more attractive to do business here. We need to think I think, aggressively or creatively about what we do to make it more attractive to developers and to businesses to move here, to build here, to redevelop here. We need to do it soon.
David?